Hello, this is the Free Soul Podcast. I'm here with one of the most beautiful hearts in the city. This man does so much more than just hip-hop, but when he does hip-hop, it's amazing. He gives and gives and gives in ways that I don't think we talk about nearly enough, and that's one of the main reasons why I wanted to have him on this show. Mr. Paul Willis, say hi to everybody.
Hey, what's up, everybody? What's going on? Man, I appreciate you for having me.
You're definitely on that list of like people I've been meaning to sit down and just have like a little heart-to-heart conversation, and why not make it public?
Yeah,
everyone to enjoy.
Look, I'm down for it. We are for real, like on the block.
Yeah.
Like there are people rolling by, somebody in a wheelchair going down an alley. Like,
yeah, I was talking to Paul. He was like, you know, we can meet in your quiet office, or we could just sit out here and wait for like sirens to pass by, you know, get some of the city ambiance going.
Yeah, no, I'm for it.
Well, I got to lead off with the softest ball question I could ask. Paul Willis, is hip hop poetry?
Oh man, yes. Rap is rhythm and poetry. You know, I think about that question a lot because sometimes people think that there's a difference between the two. And I don't necessarily think so, right? I think that when hip hop is done like really well, it can be really poetic. Mm-hmm. And you think about all the poetic devices that you would use to enhance your poetry, right? Metaphors, similes, alliteration, just all of these things about timing and, you know, how you format your pieces. And if you take the same approach to hip hop records, it makes them so much more interesting. You know, I know that the radio and, you know, whatever's popular right now, they all kind of follow the same format. They rap about the same stuff and all of that. But if people dig a little bit deeper beneath the surface, they'll find more.
Yeah, and the other part of that drives me crazy is people make that complaint about like hip hop that they hear on the radio, but they never talk about rock. And if you listen to 98.5 right now, you will hear the exact same things being talked about: women, drugs, the whole thing.
Yep.
And nobody ever talks about that aspect.
No, it's funny because hip hop is actually like the smartest genre of music because it uses the most words. It has the highest vocabulary.
Yeah.
So while like pop records and all that kind of stuff typically dumb it down to like a third or fourth grade vocabulary so everybody in the world can sing along, hip hop records, it's a lot harder to do that. There's like way more unique words in hip hop music than any other genre.
Have you done the vocabulary breakdown for Paul Willis yet? How many words?
I have not.
I bet you're up there in the ranks. For those who don't know, there's a website a while ago that I saw that actually showed like the amount of words that certain hip hop artists use, like ranking them from low to high. I think like Sir Mix-a-Lot was like 2 words, and then like, there was like most stuff at the top. Yeah, exactly. But yeah, I'm sure you'd rank really high on that just from what I've heard. And how many albums you've had? How many albums does Paul Willis have?
Excuse me. That's a good question. And I hope that my asthma and my allergies don't get the best of me.
Yeah, no, we're out here in like Pollen City right now.
It's fine. But I think the official count is like 11. But there's also like side projects, right? Where it's like, this is like a short little EP, or even with the last album, Wonderland, I released a live version of it and an acoustic version of it. So I'm not counting those as like additional albums.
Wow, you're not even doing the cheating math.
Look, I'd probably be closer to like 16 if that was the case. But yeah, I just won't do that. So it's, I think, officially 11.
Yeah.
That's where we're at.
And I'd hate to just focus on your music because there's so much more to Paul Willis. Like I was saying at the start, it's very easy to go like, oh, he has all these albums and he does an amazing job on stage. So much of what you do, though, is with the people. From what I understand, and I don't actually know your history that well, so please feel free to correct me. You started off as a unicorn. No, you started. You started off with City Year in the city, moving here from Boston.
Yep.
And so, if you could just really quickly describe City Year for people so they understand.
City Year, it's an international organization, but it's a education-focused nonprofit that places teams of volunteers into schools to be tutors and mentors for students. So we have about 30 different sites, like chapters in the United States. There's 2 in the UK, one in London and another in Birmingham, which is in the UK. and then Johannesburg, South Africa.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. There's like really interesting, I think, histories to some of our international sites, but it's been around since '88, and it's been really incredible to kind of see the organization just grow. And for context, I was born in '87, right? So I was a kid in schools that had City Year in my school.
Yeah.
And then I had an opportunity my first year with the organization to then be a tutor and a mentor at my elementary school, where my principal still was. Some of my teachers were still there. It was like this really crazy full circle experience. And I was doing that for a couple of years, and there was an opportunity to start up the chapter here in Sacramento. So then I moved out here December 1st, 2011. Oh. That's my caliversary. So all your guests can like send me gifts on that day. That'd be great. But yeah, no, that's really what brought me out here, and just like a passion and commitment to education and serving the community.
Wow. So the chapter out here, did you start it, or was it?
Yeah, I wasn't the only person.
Oh,
but like,
I never knew that.
Yeah. It takes a team of people to get anything that's successful going. But there were 14 of us.
Wow.
And, part of my role and responsibility on our team was to serve a fifth grade classroom kind of during the day, showing what this program looks like to, school partners. And then during the afternoons and during the evenings, my responsibility was community engagement and outreach. So all the branding and awareness stuff, kind of getting the word out about the organization. I attended like every neighborhood association meeting in the city council meetings, high schools, colleges, just community events, to just like tell people like, hey, like, this is who we are. This is what we do. You should either apply or tell somebody to apply, because we're looking to get started.
And that's something I've always noticed about you, is that you're very much not afraid to put yourself out there and go like, this is what I'm doing. Come along with, let's have a good time, but let's also make some change. Yeah. And has that always been Paul Willis? Like back in Boston, is that Paul Willis?
I think in Boston I had to learn that. A lot of my history back home was just like growing up, a bunch of struggle, trying to figure out who I am as a person, right? And I think that the biggest challenges for me was getting to that place where I finally felt like stable as an adult and kind of creating my space, right? Because my family situation wasn't the greatest. I didn't have the greatest relationship with my mom. My grandmother raised, me and my brothers and sisters growing up. So when I was coming of age, I was like bouncing around a lot and didn't have a stable like home environment. And it wasn't until City Year and I'm living off an AmeriCorps stipend, right? I'm like, this is the most amount of money I've seen in my life, which is like wild to people. Yeah. They're like, wait, you made like $800 a month. I'm like, yeah, and this was a lot for me at that time.
How old were you?
I was easily 20, 21.
Oh, wow.
You know what I mean? Yeah. And I was like right in that pocket. And I was just like, I'm not like living on, I'm not living with my sister. I'm like sharing a room in Roxbury. That's $300. Right. And it was a interesting experience and opportunity to really learn about what it meant to become an adult with like very little to no money. But I had this like passion and this drive. I knew I like wasn't ever going to sell drugs. I knew I wasn't ever going to join a gang. I wanted to do something that was positive and productive. And giving back was like my way to do that. So if it meant that I was, serving my community and making ends meet, then I was comfortable with that. And, it wasn't easy to do, but yeah. I mean, coming from where I was coming from, right, where my mom was making less than like $600 a month on Social Security, right? Like, I was able to figure out, my adult life back then, and then started to really like self-actualize before moving out, right? And
what did that process look like?
Man, it was hard. I had to like have this reconciliation conversation with my mom, just around her not being there for us and for me specifically, like growing up. And I never knew my dad, which is like a whole other story, right? Like there's no father's name on my birth certificate. And it wasn't until really like my birthday this year that I had taken a DNA test, and I found out that my father was like Ethiopian, which is weird because I still don't even have a name. But like, called up my mom, was like, hey, like, who was this guy? Right? Like, I know a little bit, and I could probably track him down through Ancestry.com, but you know. And then my mom was like, oh no, I know him. And actually, he might actually still be living like 15 minutes away from where you grew up. And I'm like, for real?
Living around the corner this whole time?
Yeah, I'm like, if he wasn't an enemy, like you could have told me, right? Like, relax.
So have you met him since?
No, not yet.
Yeah.
She's trying to track him down right now. Actually, she's in the process of that, which is a wild thing, right? But so you know, the process of just like self-actualizing and kind of learning about who I am and who I want to be and how to do that. That really, I think, came through my first couple of years at City Year. I had been volunteering and like working with youth during, you know, while I was in college. But then when I was doing it in the community and then actually able to like live on my own and be in my neighborhood, I recognized that, you know, the goals and the dreams that I had to redefine that then, because my grandmother always told me to go to college and get a good job, but that was it, right? Like we never got to have these conversations about like what happens next.
Yeah.
You know, and that part I think was I think challenging in the sense because there's no guidance there, but it also gave me this freedom to like figure it out. So I think I like dove into that a little bit more than other people might, with people in their life who can like, you know, guide them and help them along. But because I didn't have that, I had to like actively seek out like, what are my next steps? What, you know, how do I start my career and all this stuff? So I think that was that process of understanding myself really well and understanding how I could be, and then figuring out how I can impact the world around me.
Yeah. And something else I'm curious about that I've been curious about for a while, but I've never known how to really ask. Just why Sacramento?
You know, I knew nothing. I think it was just the opportunity, right, that presented itself. So I was ready to go back to school because I didn't graduate college. I didn't finish. But I was ready to go back the fall of 2011. But my AmeriCorps Education Award didn't clear for the fall semester. If it had, none of this other stuff would have happened. So you can blame the, you know, registrar's office or the bursar's office, whoever at the College of the Holy Cross for that. But because of that, I took on some work, and I was looking for a second like part-time job. And I went back to City Year and I was like, hey, I'm looking for some part-time work. Do you need somebody to help like manage events or anything like that? And, you know, one of my mentors said, hey, there's this opportunity to go and be a part of a startup team in Sacramento.
Wow.
He told me that only 200 people ever had started up a City Year site.
Oh, yeah. So you got to say yes to that.
Yeah, right. I was like, okay, yeah. And I saw maybe a potential future for myself with the organization because it was an organization I had believed in. And, you know, I thought, okay, this could be a cool opportunity. Let me apply and let me go. But I never knew or thought that past that first year, that startup year, that I'd be staying. And it wasn't until I got hired as a program manager. It was my first staff job with like a salary check and benefits and all of that I was like, okay, no, I'm here now for real. And I'm gonna figure everything else out.
I'm so glad you've been able to like just be a part of this community because again, you do so much. Aside from City Year and outside of hip hop, what's your favorite project that you've run?
Ooh, dang, there are so many.
Yeah, I know.
You know, honestly, I think. And it's a crazy time of year, like late October, November, December, and January for me, because I'm now the director of operations for MLK 365.
Yeah.
But my responsibilities just started as like manager city here, folks. Oh, you do a really good job of managing volunteers. Manage all of our volunteers. Oh, hey, you know what? You have been documenting this process really well, and you're an artist. Do you want to put together our programming for a single stage? And then fourth year, how about all of our stages? And can you do all of our stages and manage volunteers? And it's like all of this stuff. And I just never said no. And I just kept saying yes and yes and yes and yes because MLK 365 is another organization I believe in, and kind of their mission to inspire, educate, and activate people around Dr. King's dream and his legacy is something that's also like really near and dear to my heart too. So for me, kind of jumping into that stuff, it was incredible. But there's a bunch of other things that I've been able to get into that have been really interesting and exciting, not just as an artist, but as a community member, right? But that I think is like the biggest thing.
Yeah, and we'll kind of jump over to your poetry really quick because you were one of the 4 winners of the FreeSoul poetry contest.
That was really cool.
There's a lot of tough competition. You beat some heavy hitters. I'm not even gonna lie, and it's not even like talking up to you or anything like that.
Thank you.
And there was a line that stood out to me in your poem, which was titled "Help Me Find My Way," and it's a bottomless ocean filled with stories and lies, freedom, redemption, and depth. I'm certain one day it will swallow me whole. Obviously, you'll read that line better when we do the performance part. But what did that line mean to you when you wrote it?
I've had this thing with water, right? And I think the more and more I've studied, like, just African spirituality, Orishas, and that kind of stuff, you realize that there is this balance that's always been maintained in the world, right? Where it doesn't even matter like what corner of the world you come from. I think everybody recognizes that, the things that bring life can also bring death, right? So water is a lot like that. And for me, I had this crazy experience when I was younger of almost drowning in a wave pool at like water country back home, but that's equivalent to Sunsplash out here, right? So it was just this crazy thing where strangers like helped bring me to safety, but they had no clue who I was. They just like saw me as like this kid who like couldn't swim and was drowning when the waves got super choppy and like real crazy. So I think about like that particular moment, and I think about how a lot of that trauma is also tied to ancestral trauma of like my people coming over in slave ships and all this stuff. And it's weird now because my family's Jamaican, so I knew that there was a slave history, right? Yeah. But my father's side of the family, Ethiopia, has never been colonized, which I mean, I didn't know until like literally 2 weeks ago. So like, so that's wild to, even process. But I think writing that, particular line, I think about, my own experience with large bodies of water and the fear that's there. I think about the ancestral trauma in history, but I also think about just that balance, right, that water can bring. So just in those lines, it's a mix of all of those things. Yeah. There's so many stories that are told or that have been lost because of this water, right? That, for some people, it represented that freedom, right? Of like, I'm going to hop off the slave ship because I'm rebelling. I refuse, right? You think about Igbo's landing and a whole bunch of these other like slave rebellion stories. But then you think about how also we need this water, right? For life. And a lot of Caribbean life is centered, like our cuisine and all that stuff is centered around the ocean. Yeah. And, that's not dissimilar to other places in the world, but I think that water in my life holds a different kind of significance.
Yeah. So, I gotta ask, it's all good, as someone who's known for doing hip hop in this city, do you find that you're open and accepted in poetry venues? Because I know that sometimes there could be a little bit of a non-intermingling of those two things, even though they're pretty much the same.
I think that because of my writing, I've been accepted everywhere I've gone.
Yeah.
I think that there might be some other people who like stick strictly to like rhyme schemes and patterns and trying to sound cool or braggadocious. That never plays over well in like poetry circles.
And I've noticed, not to cut you off, but I've noticed there are poets who do the same thing, who write about themselves and they just kind of build themselves up. Sorry, had to interject that.
It's a real thing, and I think that if you make a genuine effort as a writer to connect to others by either like sharing your own personal experience in a way that's like really honest and doesn't just paint yourself as like the hero of every story, right? Like,
yeah,
I think people really respect that. You know, I also think that, you know, I don't adhere to like a singular way of writing, right? So even in hip hop, I work to like break down form and structure because I've studied that. I've studied like my favorite artists and the greatest hip hop artists of all time, and we really out here in the city.
Yeah.
You can get the Amazon Prime truck.
Shout outs to the Amazon Prime truck, which I didn't actually know they had the reverse noise when they do the backups.
No, but it's cool.
Yeah, not an ad, by the way.
Yeah. But yeah, so because I don't adhere to a particular like form and structure, some of my hip hop pieces then take on these forms of like longer like poetry pieces, and I'm not always rapping on the 2 and the 4, you know. So there's that, and I incorporate a lot of poetry over my music.
Yeah.
So for me, I think that there's been this interesting blend where I've experimented and tried a lot of things out at open mics here just to see how they go over, and to see if there are certain kind of ideas or things that stick better than others. But I think that that's why I've been accepted, because when people recognize me as like a working artist and somebody who's like constantly developing my craft, and when I perform, they know that like every couple months they're gonna get something new from me after I've worked something out.
Yeah,
you know. So
you know, my favorite, I think one of my favorite Paul Willis moments, and it's not a specific moment, is when someone's up on like at an open mic over at Soul Collective, and they're doing this braggadocious stuff, and you get up on the mic, and you don't necessarily like talk down to them, but you just show them like there's a whole other side to hip hop to consider. Those are some of my favorite Paul Willis moments, because it's gentle, but at the same time like, nah, but you should be doing this.
Yeah, I know. I definitely bring that like competitiveness to it. You know, I'm not. I grew up playing sports like basketball, football. I ran track. So I know how to be on a team, but I also know that being on a team doesn't mean that you just like butter everybody up. Like sometimes you really have to like push and challenge other people on your team to kind of get better. And I view everybody in hip hop as like on my team, right? Even if they don't make the kind of music that like I like. So for me, it's for those folks, like I want to challenge them to like try more, show me more, right? Like you might do that because you think it makes money or it might get radio play. But when you're in a circle of other people who do the same craft, I can write those songs too. But that doesn't define me as an artist. Like, who are you? I want to get to know you as an artist. So I challenge other hip hop artists to you know, pick up their pen and really work on their craft. Yeah,
and especially in this era where radio play really starts to mean less and less and less, and all you really need is for a Spotify song to blow up, and that has been historically a number of different styles and ways of approaching music.
Right.
Yeah. Right. I've got to ask. Okay, so I'm not going to ask the question that I've asked before, which is Paul Willis running for office? We're not going that route. I know your answer by now. The answer is no. You've got other lanes that you feel like you can be productive in, more productive than you would in the holding office. But of the people that you know in this city, if you had to stack, say, City Hall, who would you choose?
Oh, man. Okay.
And it doesn't have to just be artists. It could be just people.
Oh, yeah. No, for sure. So I'd want Miss T. Sandifer. She runs, Miss T's Urban Dance Studio, and I want her to represent the North. She's incredible. There's a bunch of people who I think could represent like Midtown, downtown. So I'm not gonna start there. I'll come back there, but I think in the South area, it's got to be Chinua Rhodes, Mai Vang. I know Chinawa's on the school board right now, and Mai's city councilwoman, and they're just an incredible team of people. So like they're like my team in the South. I also just got done watching Game of Thrones, so I'm very much like, who's my king in the North?
Real quick, before we jump too far into it, who were you hoping would get the throne?
Oh man, honestly, like I really wanted Daenerys Targaryen to get it. I had no problem with her destroying everything that Cersei and the rest of them built. I thought it was justice. Other people may not, and that's fine. But
the show's been done for a little while. Anyway, back to the actual question that means something.
I think for the like land park area, I'd want to shift the balance of power there. I think that's where a lot of folks get it messed up, and I'd want somebody from CV Circle to really represent that area. So there's a bunch of names from the community, but I think Beto, and a lot of people don't know Beto 916, but he's somebody who works in the cannabis industry now, who grew up in the community, made a way for himself out of the projects and into Land Park. And he's somebody who moves like a politician, but has never been given like the opportunity to do like city management or planning or any of that stuff. But he'd be great at it because of how he moves. He's like, if you know him, then you know that he's passionate about people, about justice and all that stuff. And he's a name who I think wouldn't get a lot of that shine. So Beto for sure. There's a bunch of people in Midtown. I love Katie. I'd love to see Maya Wallace. Like, what I mean? Midtown Maya for mayor.
Absolutely.
Or for just like city council person in Midtown. I'm with it, like, all the way. And some of the other areas, like East Sacramento, some of the other places, I don't really know too many people out there. But those are my like kings and queens of the North, East, West, South, all that stuff.
Yeah, and I don't think I'm too familiar with Beto, but I definitely know Maya Wallace, and Maya doesn't get nearly enough love for all that she does.
Oh, she's incredible. Yeah. And just a real powerhouse, not just somebody who's like an intellectual, right? Who like the people can't understand. Like, I think her ability to translate like policy and make it plain for people would be a huge asset.
Absolutely.
And a lot of people know her, so I would just hope that there's an opportunity people get to vote for her, So, but those are like the people who I would want.
Yeah, and for you yourself, do you see yourself staying in Sacramento?
That's a good question. I've almost moved a couple of times, but not really because like I was trying to like go back across the country, but because there were a couple opportunities in like Stockton that were like, were viable for a short amount of time. But I think it would have to be the right kind of opportunity to pull me anywhere. Yeah. You know what I mean? It couldn't just be any opportunity. It would have to be like, yo, that's a big step up, and until I find that, I'm here. So.
Yeah. I'm shocked. I'm so sorry. We've gone this whole interview. I haven't mentioned it even one time. Paul Willis is hip-hop at bandcamp.com is the website to go to for this man's 16 albums. I just have to mention it in the middle of this. I feel like I'm contractually obligated every time I'm with you to mention it, put it out there for the world, because you do make beautiful music.
Thank you.
And in a variety of different styles and feels like... oh God, what was the name of your last album? Not Wonderland, but
Promise in the Land of Milk and Honey.
Yeah, beautiful, just like these soft jazz tones to it, telling stories. And I guess the question I have to ask is: I know you work with a lot of different artists. What's your creative process? Because in art, especially since you're building your own path with it. There's so many different ways you could go. What's your creative process look like when you sit down to make an album? Like, how do you even start?
I think an album starts with just like a collection of writings that I look at after a certain period. I'm like, I think there's something here, right? And it needs to be like crafted or refined to get it to be a cohesive body of work. But it mostly starts with just listening to a lot of music, right? And I'll listen to beats that people send me, and you know, kind of see how it makes me feel. What's the energy? What's the emotion behind the music? And do I have lyrics to match that? So there's that. I'd like to explore a lot of concepts, and you know, there are some songs where it's like it's just like a really elongated like concept thing where it's getting played out like that. But when it comes to creating an album, I try to find like a theme that then fits the majority of the writing, you know. And if there's things I might need to tweak or add or take away to have it better fit, there's a heavy like editing process in the writing part of it where like I've scrapped whole verses or entire songs over beats because I felt like, you know what, I can do better to fit like the direction of a particular project. So, you know, I think that once I have a collection of stuff, I'm like, okay, this is going in a particular place. What's missing is my question that I ask next. And then from there, it's like, okay, well, let me add this, let me edit here, let me take this away. And then once I feel like my writing is complete, then I go into the studio. Like I don't work it out in the studio. I write everything and then I show up because I'm also paying for studio time, paying for, you know what I mean? I pay for everything. There's no label, there's no nothing. So,
which is wild to me that you have so many albums and it's all just self-produced.
Yeah, no, for real. It's and it's crazier that every single one of them has made back what I invested.
Oh wow, yeah, that's right.
Like that's wild too. Like Wonderland is the only one because it just came out literally like 2 months ago.
Yeah, so we'll have to see.
You know, whatever it was, but it will. Yeah. I'm confident, and I'm looking to make it all back this year. Like that's my goal, which is crazy because, you know, the music for Wonderland by itself was like recording, mix, master to have it done was like about $5,800, right? Yeah. And then with the film on top of that and the screening that we did over at the Guild, that was probably another like $12,000. So it's probably like an $18,000 like project in its entirety. But that's like a studio produced album, a live album, an acoustic album, and a film. Yeah, you know what I mean.
Just a couple
like,
things. Yeah,
it's like it was a massive kind of thing. But I have a plan and a strategy to make that back. So my goal is to make it back, and we'll see if I can. Yeah. This year, I'm confident, but you know, I gotta do the work, right? And that's the thing with every artist is, it's not just about like creating and then like letting it sit, right? I think that people who do that, it's great. You know, I think that people can create stuff, and then there's stuff I've never released, right? But as a working artist, right? And I'm like, this is a project I'm trying to sell. Yeah. This is something I'm trying to get heard. Then for me, the work is once it's created, getting it out. So that's like the next step in the process is, you know, once I've paid for studio time, I've gotten everything mixed, mastered, and I've got like visuals or like pictures and lyrics or something to package with it, then it's now I need to convince people that this is worth their time. Yeah. You know? And so that's the marketing, that's the promotion, and I don't have a ton of money for a whole bunch of that, not in the way that a label deal, you know, would give me that flexibility. But I think I found a way to really authentically connect deeply with people. So why I don't have a wide audience, it's super deep. Like I can call or email every single person on my email list, and I know that they'll pick up. Nice. Like that's something that a whole bunch of other artists can't say that they can do. But people have then provided me with a ton of other opportunities to like share my work or branch out or do all these really cool things. So, you know, I'm not a like crazy well-known name, and there's a whole bunch of artists in the city who are like, yeah, Paul, we've kind of heard of him, but he's not like at the cool kids table. And I'm like, I don't care about the cool kids table. You know what I mean? Like, I care about connecting with real people.
Yeah.
So that's why I bring it. Like, I'm not always in artist spaces. I'm not always at the hip hop shows. I'm not always opening for your favorite artist at a Harlow's or Ace of Spades or wherever. You know, I'm like in your kid's school, like doing a workshop in at the community center, like screening a film. I'm, you know what I mean? Like, I'm about to do an event with Sac State and USF. And it's the teacher's education program at USF and the doctorate program for educational leadership at Sac State.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
so
yeah.
like,
you just do a couple things.
Yeah, but like for me, it's like, you know, I get to bring hip hop into that space, and we're gonna like intellectualize about my album, my film, and how many other hip hop artists can say that?
Yeah,
you know.
And when you started doing all this, did you ever think that there'd be this blend in your life of kind of, I guess, for lack of a better term, corporate America with hip hop? And do you feel like those blend together seamlessly, or have you had to kind of?
Oh, it's not seamless.
Yeah, yeah.
It's not seamless, but have I wanted that blend? Yeah, absolutely. I think that hip hop brings a lot of value to really professional and corporatized spaces. You know, as a diversity, equity, and inclusion consultant, I think the biggest part of my job is helping people really shift their worldview. And nothing does that like hip hop. Like when you get people who are hip hop, kind of embody those values, I think at the core there is this like transformative justice sense of, I'm going to walk in a space and no matter what was here before, I'm going to leave it better. Entertained, happy, maybe, you know what I mean? Maybe activated for a social issue, whatever. But I'm going to create something out of nothing with just my words, right? So for me, when I'm having conversations about like why diversity is important, why equity is important, all that stuff, for a lot of people, like it's a perspective shift, right? I've benefited from these things. I may not have known some of this history before, but now once you have the information, what do you do about it, right? And that's hip hop to me. It's like this idea of, I'm going to encounter you. I'm going to share my story, my culture, my people's culture, communities I come from, communities I represent that aren't typically in your spaces. And now once you have this information, what are you going to do? If you thought this was cool, then join me, right? And we're going to continue to build on this, right? But if you're completely opposed or against, then maybe you're not somebody I should be working with at all. You know, so that's the other thing is, you know, I think that there's a lot of people who are either, you know, diversity and inclusion consultants or whatever, who are fighting against these oppressive forces in those spaces, but they don't, sometimes they'll like give up parts of themselves just to get in the door for those spaces.
Yeah.
Right? And I've said no to more contracts that I've said yes to because I'm like really honest with people. Like, yes, I am a black male, cis, hetero, right? Like all of this stuff. I bring a certain kind of lens to this work. I am not, you know, a trans person with a lens on this work. They're going to bring you something different. Somebody with a person of different abilities, right? Coming into that space and into that work, they're going to bring a different lens to it. So for me, it's, you know, how can I be as inclusive as I can be? But also for me to be real and authentic with like clients and other people, I tell them like, you shouldn't just hire me.
Yeah.
Right? Like, you should honestly go out and hire
That's such a thing.
people
like
of these other communities, and don't just like think I'm going to solve all your issues.
Yeah.
That's not how this is going to work.
So often in corporate America, people go like, oh, diversity. He's our diversity person.
That's our one guy. Or that's our one, you know what I mean? Like, I'm just like, yo, y'all need to chill with that.
It's literally not diversity. It's literally one person.
No, it's not. And it's lifelong work.
Yeah.
So, like, as you know, as honest as I'd like to be, for me, I also know there's so much more I have to learn in this space. And, you know, I work towards that every day. But even with everything I learn, I'm never going to be the expert in somebody else's experience. Yeah. So for, you know, all my corporate clients and anybody else who's like listening to this kind of conversation, what I really want them to understand is, you know, the beauty of hip hop is that you get to hear so many different voices in the cipher. Mm-hmm. They're all like equal in that sense, right? Yeah. Like, there's no one person who is better than. Yeah, sure, there might be more skilled rappers here, this or that, but
okay, time out. That is the biggest engine for the worst, most booty-looking car I've ever seen.
Yeah. It's got like a monster truck engine and a Ford Taurus. Like,
and he's not kidding.
There's no reason for that. Setting off car alarms? Like, why? But what I was saying, you can hear it. It's like 4 or 5 blocks away now.
Oh, yeah.
You can still hear it. That's wild.
That's the funniest thing I've seen all day.
Yeah. No. Well, welcome to it. No, but I think the value in hip hop is that everyone's voice in the cipher should be respected. Mm-hmm. Period. Right. And while some people might be more skilled at this part or that part, that doesn't mean that person has any less value. Right. Like, everybody can work and improve and develop on their craft, but that person having an opportunity to be recognized is the point. Yeah. Right. And if we could translate that experience into corporate spaces where employees and supervisors and everybody feels like they can show up and be authentic and recognize and honor everybody's culture in a way that's like productive and cohesive to the team environment, then that's, I think, what we're working towards. But it's not a, you know, office version of Diversity Day. You know what I mean? Like,
I've been watching. I've never actually watched The Office until COVID hit, and I had time to sit down and watch it. Yeah.
Yeah. So for my Office fans, y'all understand what that means, but yeah, no, it shouldn't just be this like tokenism around diversity and representation, and people think, oh, that's it. Yeah. Because it's more than that. It's like a balance of power, right? The work of eliminating hierarchies, right? So that people. It's not that, you know, you may not have a supervisor or things like that, but you don't feel disrespected by your supervisor because you feel like you're not being treated like a human being in that space, right? I think that some of that stuff is what we're working to dismantle. But there's so much more to that. We could just go on down.
Yeah, I mean, that's an entire course load of work. Yeah. And an entire major at a college. Mm-hmm. But I've got to ask one last question before we get you out of here, because we could talk all day, and it's been wonderful. Thank you, seriously, for being on this. With Sacramento, if you had to change one thing, and that's all you could change, what would you pick? What would you do?
Oh, man. You know, there's a lot of things. I'd make a black woman mayor. You know what I mean? Yeah. And not just like any black woman, but like a black woman who's been fighting for equity and for justice, like a Sonia Lewis. Mm-hmm. You know, I'd want somebody like that to have power in the city and be able to kind of influence others and that kind of thing from that scale. Because there's so many like harmful policies that are racist, classist, sexist, all of these isms, right? But I think it would take somebody from like a deep kind of intersectional lens to dismantle some of that stuff from a policy level. And I think that there are cities or there are places that have had black women as leaders that have really kind of shifted that stuff and moved the needle a lot more quickly than other cities with different kinds of leadership. So I think that'd be the one thing, because then all the other stuff that I'd want to see changed in terms of like education, reform, housing justice, food justice, I think all of that stuff like are just like dominoes that would then fall, right?
Yeah.
So that's that's I think my one.
That's a beautiful answer.
That I think would.
What a way to finish this off.
Things, yeah.
Thank you so much, Paul, for coming on. If you don't know Paul's work, once again, Paul Willis is hiphop.bandcamp.com. And actually, let me back. If you want to know his hip hop work, go there. If you want to know his his outside of hip hop work, talk to the man himself. He's always out here. He's always doing so much for everybody.
Yeah, hit me up on Instagram. So like everything is Paul Willis is hip hop, right? It's my Instagram, it's my email, my Gmail account, it's my Cash App, my Venmo, my all of that stuff. So however you want to get in touch with me, that's how you can get in touch with me. And there's no middleman, right? There's no like manager. I'm never gonna refer you to anybody else. Like if you message me, you get me directly.
Bada bing. Well, yeah, again, thank you so much. And to everybody out there, I hope you're taking care of yourselves, doing the best you can. Times are rough, but we're tough people. All right. Peace out.